would say,
coming to speak to the cameras.
In listening to the charges from the judge, who's, as you know, very conflicted and corrupt, because of the confliction, very, very corrupt. Mother Teresa could not beat these charges. These charges are rigged. The whole thing is rigged. The whole country's a mess between the borders and fake elections, and you have a trial like this where the judge is so conflicted he can't breathe. He's got to do his job. And it's not for me, that I can tell you. It's a disgrace. And I mean that. Mother Teresa could not beat those charges, but we'll see. We'll see how we do. It's a very disgraceful situation. Every single legal scholar and expert said this is no case. It shouldn't be brought, and it certainly could have been brought 7 years ago, not in the middle of a presidential election. It was all done by Joe Biden. This judge contributed to Joe Biden, and far worse than that, but I'm not allowed to talk about it because I have a gag order. Far worse than that, by 1,000 times worse than that. The worst I've ever heard, but I can't talk about it. It'll be talked about, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. But it'll be talked about in the history books. What's happening here is weaponization at a level that nobody's seen before, ever. And it shouldn't be allowed to happen. So I'll stay around here. This is 5 weeks. And 5 weeks of really essentially not campaigning, although I took a big lead in the polls over the last few weeks. Something's going on. Because I think the people of this country see that this is a rigged deal. It's a weaponized deal for the Democrats to hit their political opponent. For Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of the United States. He's destroying our country. He's letting millions of people from jails, from prisons, from insane asylums, from mental institutions, drug dealers pour in. Venezuela, if you look at their crime statistics, they've gone down 72% in crime because they're releasing all their criminals into our country because of this horrible president that we have. And then they have a protest of Robert De Niro yesterday. He's a fool. He's a broken down fool standing out there, and he got maggot. He got maggot yesterday. He got a big dose of it. But I just want to say it's a very unfair trial. It should have never happened. If it was going to happen, it should have happened 7 years ago. As you know, Bragg didn't want to bring it. The Southern District didn't bring it. The FEC didn't bring it. This judge didn't even let us use the #1 election attorney. He's making the rules. He doesn't know anything about elections. He doesn't know anything about voting and vote counts. He doesn't know anything about this stuff. That's not his profession. We had the leading election expert in the country, Brad Smith, ready to testify. Wouldn't let him do it. They wouldn't let another gentleman who represented, and you know very well, you saw it. It was the worst I think I've ever seen anyone treated on a stand. Bob Costello, wouldn't let him talk about all of the hundreds of emails that he was sent by a gentleman, another gentleman, who I can't mention because I'm gagged. Every time I speak to you, you ask me simple questions. I'm not allowed to give you the answer because I'm gagged by this judge. But we have a very, very serious problem here. I mean, our country's going bad. And remember, and let me just leave you with this. This is all because of Joe Biden and I don't even think it's him. I don't think he's smart enough to think about it. But it's the people that surround him in the office. They're smart. They're fascists, they're communists, but they're smart. And they're ruining our country. But we're going to win this election. November 5th is going to be the most important day in the history of our country. We're going to take back our country from these fascists and these thugs that are destroying us with inflation and with everything they do, how stupid they are, allowing 15, 16, 17 million people into our country, totally unvetted, totally unchecked. We're going to bring back our nation November 5th. Remember, most important day in the history of our country. In the meantime, this trial is rigged. Thank you.
Would that mean you think of yourself as more holy than Mother Teresa?
And those are the comments of the former president. His first comments since the jury began deliberating in his criminal hush money trial, not seeming to believe there was going to be a positive outcome, as he claimed that Mother Teresa could not beat the charges that are facing him there. You see, he is surrounded by his entourage. He also made several false claims while he was there. We'll get to those with our fact checker Daniel Dale in a moment. And Paula Reed, though, just to hear Trump, as he was as he chose not to speak last night, he chose not to speak this morning coming into the room, and then you saw that remarkable moment that we have not seen so far in this case. Typically, it's quite clear when Trump is leaving the courtroom that he's going to speak to cameras. He carries his comments in hand that he's going to read to the cameras. He came up and decided to criticize the case, criticize the instructions that the jury just heard, claim falsely that this is being done at the behest of President Biden, which it's not. But what is important there is not even just the words themselves, it's that he clearly does not believe there's a positive outcome for him waiting at the other end of these jury deliberations.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's interesting, both sides of this case framing it as election interference. Prosecutors have continued to try to rebrand it from the hush money case to a 2016 election interference case, and the Trump team doing the same thing, arguing that these have only been brought in an election year. This is his argument in the court of public opinion. It includes falsehoods trying to link this prosecution to President Biden, which, again, that is just not true. But this is how he's trying to frame it, and definitely does not appear optimistic about his odds here. And as I've been told repeatedly, they believe the best likely outcome for them, for most people, the best outcome would be an acquittal. For them, the best likely outcome is a deadlock jury.
And we also have Daniel Dale here with us, as I mentioned. Daniel Dale, I don't know, you fact-checked all of these before, I believe. I don't think any of these will be new to you. I know you and I have been on together several times to fact-check the claim about people emptying their insane asylums, countries, and sending them to the United States, which I know there's no basis for. Also, his claims, wrongly, that President Biden is the one driving this, when, of course, he was indicted by a jury of his peers here, and it is the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, who brought this case.
Yeah, you barely need me anymore. You got these fact checks down. Everything you said is correct. He also referred to fake elections in this country, a vaguer than usual reference to his false claims, his lies, that the 2020 election was rigged. We have entirely legitimate elections in this country, including the 2020 election he lost. He also used this figure. He said 15, 16, 17 million people being let in over the border under Joe Biden. Those are wildly exaggerated figures. We are under 10 million so-called encounters. That includes many millions who were sent back under Title 42 after they were encountered, so not all of them were let in. And I think a point of clarification, he said something true. He said that Judge Merchan had donated to President Biden, to Joe Biden's campaign. That is true, but I think it's important to note that the amount of the donation was $15. So just a point of fact there.
Well, and that's why whenever he claimed, he said the judge is so conflicted that he, quote, can't breathe, was his quote. I mean, that has been something that Trump has long claimed during this trial. I should note, as someone who's been in that jury room, or in that courtroom watching this, the judge often strives at great lengths to be fair to both sides here, both the prosecution and the defense.
Yeah.
And also, this has gone through a process where he was asked if he was too conflicted to preside over this, and he was told no.
Yeah, and Caitlin, there's one more thing I should mention. He said that that the Trump side, his defense, had a leading election expert, and the judge just refused to allow him to testify. That is not what happened. What happened was the judge, as is common, limited the scope of the possible testimony that this expert could have offered, and then Trump's defense said, okay, we're just not going to call him at all. So they could have called him to talk about various matters. Maybe it would have helped them. The judge did not completely reject this possible witness, and the Trump's team instead made its own call not to have him up there on the stand.